In the desert winds of Mesopotamia, where the sands still whisper the names of forgotten kings, there lies a question that has haunted mystics, scholars, and seekers for centuries. What if the true code of creation, the key to understanding the hidden order of the universe, was not entrusted to prophets or saints, but to the ancient rulers of Sumer? Imagine a code, not written in the language of men, but in the symbols of eternity itself, guarded in silence by kings who knew their power came from something greater than the throne they sat upon. This is not merely a story of history, nor just another myth to be placed on dusty shelves of forgotten libraries. This is a secret that stretches beyond time, touching the very core of your soul as you listen now. The angel Raziel, the keeper of secrets of God, has always been described in mystical traditions as the one who carries the book of divine mysteries, a book said to contain the architecture of creation and the laws that govern both heaven and earth. Legends tell us that Adam himself received this wisdom after being cast out of paradise, to remind him of his origin and guide him in the chaos of the world. But what if the story did not end there? What if Raziel's book, or fragments of its code, traveled through generations, carried in whispers and visions, until it reached the first civilization that dared to call itself the center of the world, the Sumerians? The Sumerian kings were unlike ordinary rulers. They claimed their right to power not through mere inheritance, but through divine mandate, a connection with beings from beyond the visible sky. Their temples rose like mountains in the plains, ziggurats designed not just as monuments of stone, but as stairways linking heaven and earth. Hidden behind their rituals and hymns, written in tablets that even today leave archaeologists puzzled, there may lie the traces of a language that was not meant for common understanding. This was the code veiled, encrypted, and fiercely protected that may have come directly from Raziel himself. And so the question becomes unavoidable. Why them? Why the kings of Sumer, and not others? The answer lies in the mysterious pact between heaven and earth, a pact forged when humanity was still learning to write, to count, to govern. It was the moment when civilization was born, and with it, the danger of misusing power. Raziel, the angel of divine secrets, was not merely giving knowledge. He was planting a seed of responsibility, a test for those who would carry the burden of leadership. The Sumerian kings were guardians, not only of people and land, but of a code that could alter the destiny of entire generations. Tonight, as you hear these words, you are not just listening to a distant tale. You are standing at the edge of a veil, one that separates ordinary history from the currents of hidden truth. Because if Raziel's code truly was given to the Sumerian kings, then the story of civilization itself is built on secrets that were never meant to be revealed too soon. And perhaps, just perhaps, this is the moment when the veil begins to lift. The figure of Raziel appears in whispers across mystical traditions, often described as the closest angel to the throne of God, the one who hears every word spoken in the divine court and records them in a book of unearthly knowledge. This book, known as the Sefer Raziel, is said to contain the patterns of creation, the formulas by which light becomes matter, and the codes that sustain the movements of stars and souls alike. To possess even a fragment of this wisdom was considered both a blessing and a curse, for no mortal could hold such power without being transformed by it. To the ancients, Raziel was not a distant angel. He was a watchful presence, a reminder that divine secrets were always near, though hidden from the eyes of the unworthy. Legends recount that when Adam and Eve were exiled from Eden, lost in despair and unable to understand the harshness of the new world, Raziel descended to them with his book. The gift was not comfort, but instruction, a map of how to survive, how to grow food, how to heal, and above all, how to remember the harmony they once knew. Yet even this was dangerous, for knowledge in the wrong hands becomes destruction. Some traditions even say that other angels, angered by Raziel's compassion, cast his book into the depths of the sea, fearing it would undo the balance of heaven and earth. But the book did not vanish. It resurfaced again and again, as if drawn by destiny to those who sought it with pure intent. Now imagine this. If Raziel's book was never truly lost, then it may have journeyed across centuries, slipping between kingdoms and empires until it found the soil fertile enough to bear its weight, the cradle of civilization itself. Sumer. To the Sumerians, every line carved into clay carried power. Words were not mere symbols. They were living forces, containers of energy. And so, what if their earliest writings were more than trade records or hymns to the gods? What if, hidden among the cuneiform signs, there was a code, mathematical, spiritual, cosmic, that echoed the knowledge Raziel once handed to humanity? The kings of Sumer, unlike common rulers, were bound to both the earth and the heavens. Their rule was measured not only in years but in divine legitimacy, as if each reign was part of a larger design. If any people were to guard Raziel's code, it would have been them. And here lies the true mystery. The possibility that the Sefer Raziel was never a single book but a living code, dispersed and disguised, entrusted to kings who could conceal it behind the veil of ritual, myth, and sacred architecture. If this is true, then the angel's book has not disappeared. It has simply changed its form, waiting, hidden in plain sight, for the moment when humanity would be ready to read it again. Perhaps that moment is closer than we think. Long before Egypt raised its pyramids and Babylon carved its name into the chronicles of time, there was Sumer, the first great civilization, born between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates. To walk through the ruins of Uruk or Eridu even today is to feel the pulse of a world that seemed to appear fully formed, with writing, agriculture, mathematics, and law already in place, as if delivered rather than invented. The Sumerians themselves never claimed ownership of these gifts. They believed they were taught by the gods, guided by divine messengers who descended from the heavens. And among their kings, certain names shine with an aura that cannot be explained by history alone. The Sumerian king list, a document that survives on ancient tablets, does not read like a normal record. It speaks of rulers who reigned for hundreds, even thousands of years before the Great Flood reshaped the earth. To modern historians, this may sound like myth, but to the Sumerians, it was truth. These were not ordinary men. They were chosen, elevated, and entrusted with knowledge that the rest of humanity could not bear. In their ziggurats, massive temples built as stairways to the divine, they performed rituals that echoed the alignment of stars and planets, as if guided by instructions not of this world. These kings were not simply political figures. They were custodians of a secret legacy, guardians of something that stretched far beyond their reign. Imagine a throne that did not merely command armies, but safeguarded codes of cosmic order. Imagine rulers who saw themselves as the keepers of a divine contract, one written not in ink but in the language of eternity. To the people, they appeared as intermediaries between gods and mortals. But in truth, they may have carried within their hands fragments of the angel Raziel's hidden code. It is no coincidence that the earliest forms of writing cuneiform emerged here, almost as if an invisible hand guided them to carve symbols into clay. Each wedge-shaped mark was more than a record of grain or trade. It was an echo of something older, something eternal. Scholars today study these tablets and see economic accounts, but mystics see the shadow of an encrypted knowledge, one that only the initiated could understand. And it was the kings, chosen above all others, who had the authority to protect it. But why would Raziel entrust such wisdom to Sumerian kings? Because leadership, in its truest form, was not about power but about responsibility. These kings, bound by divine covenant, carried the weight of their people's destiny. To fail in their duty meant not only political ruin but cosmic imbalance. In their silent watch, they became living links between heaven and earth. And so, behind the crown and the throne, there was always the hidden burden of guardianship, to keep the code safe until the time humanity would be ready to receive it once again. To speak of a code is to invite the mind toward numbers, letters, and formulas. Yet the hidden code of the Sumerian kings was not merely an arrangement of symbols on clay. It was a living current, a pattern woven into the architecture of temples, the rhythm of chants, and the alignments of the stars themselves. This was knowledge disguised as myth, encoded not for the masses but for the guardians who had sworn to protect it. Archaeologists uncover tablets etched with cuneiform and see records of trade, law, and offerings. But mystics whisper that within the very shapes of those symbols lie fragments of Raziel's language, formulas designed to unlock not just knowledge but power. The Sumerians were masters of duality. They hid the sacred within the ordinary. A hymn to a god might have been more than worship. It may have been an encrypted message. The measurements of a ziggurat might have reflected more than architectural skill. It may have encoded celestial ratios. What we read today as mythology could, in truth, be fragments of an ancient operating system for the human soul. This was the hidden code, a tapestry of divine mathematics, rhythm, and vibration, capable of altering reality itself when properly understood. Some traditions even suggest that the kings used this code to legitimize their reign, not by force or conquest, but by demonstrating mastery over cosmic laws. To know the code was to align with the order of creation, to govern not just with authority but with resonance. When the king's word reflected the hidden patterns of the universe, the land prospered. Crops grew, rivers flowed, and the people thrived. But when the code was broken, chaos entered famine, rebellion, and the disfavor of the gods. In this way, the code became not just a secret but the invisible foundation of society itself. The secrecy was absolute. Only the initiated within royal circles could be trusted with even a glimpse of the knowledge. It is said that inscriptions visible to the common eye contained one meaning, while hidden beneath were layers of interpretation reserved only for those prepared to receive it. Like a lock within a lock, the deeper truths were concealed so that only those who had purified themselves could read them. For Raziel's code was never meant to be wielded casually. It was a test of wisdom, discipline, and worth. And so the question remains, how much of this code survives today? Could it be that we still see fragments in the symbols of astrology, in the sacred geometry of temples across the world, or in the chants that echo through spiritual traditions? Perhaps the code was never meant to vanish but to hide in plain sight, awaiting recognition. For those who listen carefully, the Sumerian legacy still whispers. And within those whispers, one can almost hear the echo of Raziel, reminding us that the divine order is never lost, it is simply concealed, waiting for the soul prepared to see. Among the ancient rulers of Sumer, power was not measured solely by armies or wealth. True authority rested on a silent pact, an unspoken covenant that bound certain kings to a responsibility few could bear. They were not only guardians of a people or builders of cities. They were the keepers of a hidden code, fragments of Raziel's divine knowledge, entrusted to them under a veil of secrecy. This pact was never announced in public, never inscribed on monuments. It was passed through whispers, gestures, and rituals, a current that flowed invisibly from one chosen king to the next. The silence itself was part of the protection, for once spoken aloud, the code could fall into hands unworthy of its power. The kings understood that the code was more than information, it was alignment with the pulse of creation. To hold it was to carry a responsibility to maintain balance between heaven and earth. Breaking this balance meant unleashing chaos, not just upon their land but upon the order of the cosmos itself. Thus, each king who accepted the burden also accepted isolation. For who could share such a weight with others? Even their closest advisors may have seen only fragments, never the whole. It was a pact written not in ink, but in silence and in sacrifice. Stories survive of rulers who seemed blessed beyond measure, whose reigns brought prosperity and whose wisdom exceeded their years. To the common people, these were golden ages, remembered in hymns and stories. But behind the throne, the truth was darker. The kings paid a price for their knowledge. Some were haunted by visions too vast for the human mind. Others aged before their time, bearing the strain of secrets that could not be spoken. The Silent Pact gave them power, but it also demanded a cost: solitude, vigilance, and sometimes despair. To guard the code was to live with the knowledge that its misuse could unravel everything. What made the pact even more mysterious was the belief that Raziel himself remained watchful, invisible but ever present, ensuring the kings did not betray their trust. This belief created an invisible network, a sense that each guardian king was part of a chain stretching through centuries, bound together not by blood alone but by destiny. To betray the code was to break covenant with the heavens, a risk that no king could take lightly. For it was said that those who attempted to exploit the code for selfish ends would lose not only their throne, but their very soul. And so the Silent Pact endured, hidden within ceremonies, encoded in architecture, guarded by the lives of rulers whose names echo still in clay and stone. It was not a pact of glory, but of burden. And it raises the haunting question: could it be that fragments of this pact survive even now, passed invisibly through symbols, stories, and rituals we barely understand? If so, then perhaps the silent covenant of Raziel still holds sway, waiting for those who dare to remember. Every secret, no matter how carefully guarded, eventually faces the erosion of time. The kings of Sumer, bound by their silent pact, could preserve the code only for so long before war, betrayal, and the shifting tides of empires threatened to bury it in dust. The glory of Sumer was not eternal. Kingdoms rose and fell, cities once radiant with temples and markets collapsed into ruins, and the knowledge that had defined an era began to fade from memory. What was once the heartbeat of civilization became fragments scattered across deserts and rivers, shards of clay tablets hidden beneath layers of earth. With each invasion, with each collapse, more of the code was lost or deliberately hidden to prevent it from being misused. History tells us that the Akkadians conquered Sumer, absorbing its culture but distorting its essence. Later, Babylon rose, carrying echoes of the same myths and rituals, but the purity of the original covenant with Raziel began to blur. The code, once vibrant and whole, became diluted, remembered only in fragments of myth and ritual. Some whispered that priests and scribes deliberately disguised the knowledge, encoding it into stories of gods and heroes so that it could survive the storm of time. Others believed that the angel himself veiled the code, withdrawing its clarity until humanity would be ready once more. Either way, the fall of Sumer marked the beginning of forgetting. The forgetting, however, was not total. Across the ruins, archaeologists today uncover tablets that hint at impossible knowledge, astronomical calculations centuries ahead of their time, descriptions of celestial movements too precise for mere chance, and myths that seem to echo truths found in far later traditions. These fragments suggest that the code was never completely destroyed. Instead, it was scattered like seeds across history, waiting for the right soil to grow again. But to the people of the time, the silence grew heavier. The kings who once carried the pact were replaced by rulers who sought power without responsibility, who desired dominion without the burden of Raziel's law. And so the covenant weakened, and the memory of the code slipped deeper into shadows. Why was the code hidden rather than passed openly to humanity? Because power without wisdom destroys. The ancients understood that knowledge of cosmic laws could build empires or reduce them to ash. And so, as foreign armies marched into Sumer, as temples were desecrated and languages forgotten, the guardians of the code chose concealment over revelation. They buried it in rituals, architecture, and myths, ensuring that no conqueror could ever fully claim it. The fall of Sumer was not just the collapse of a kingdom. It was the intentional veiling of a divine secret, a deliberate act to protect the world from itself. And so we inherit a paradox. The most advanced civilization of its age vanished into ruin, yet its whispers endure. The forgetting was never absolute. Something remained, lingering in symbols, myths, and even in the human soul. The question is not whether the code was lost, but whether we are ready to remember it. It may seem like a story buried in the sands of history, locked away with kings and empires that no longer exist. But the hidden code of Raziel was never meant only for the rulers of Sumer. Its echoes still vibrate in the fabric of existence. And if you are hearing this now, it is not by accident. The truth is that fragments of the code are not only carved into ancient tablets or concealed in forgotten temples, they are inscribed in the human soul. You carry within you the same potential that once allowed kings to align themselves with the cosmic order. The difference is that today, the responsibility of remembering no longer belongs to monarchs or priests. It belongs to you. Consider this. The ancient Sumerians believed that every person carried a spark of divine essence, a fragment of the same light that animated the gods. The kings were entrusted with Raziel's code because they symbolized the collective, the bridge between humanity and the divine. But the deeper truth is that this bridge exists in every individual. What the kings guarded in silence is already resonating within you as intuition, as dreams, as sudden insights that defy logic. When you feel the pull of something greater than yourself, when you sense that there is meaning hidden beneath the surface of ordinary life, you are touching the very edges of that ancient code. This is why the story matters now. The fall and forgetting were not failures, they were part of a greater design. Humanity was not ready to hold the code openly, so it was veiled, hidden until a time when individuals, not kings, could begin to awaken to its truth. That time is unfolding now. The very fact that you are drawn to these words, that you feel something stir within you as you listen, is proof that the code is calling once again. It does not speak in thunder or in written symbols anymore. It speaks in the quiet alignment of your soul with a higher order of creation. Perhaps you have felt moments of clarity when everything seemed to fit together, when coincidence turned into synchronicity, when the ordinary became charged with hidden meaning. These are not accidents. They are glimpses of Raziel's code breaking through the veil, reminding you that reality is not random but purposeful. The kings once carried this awareness as their sacred duty. Now, you are invited to carry it as your personal awakening. The question is not whether the code exists, but whether you will recognize it within yourself. It requires no temple, no throne, no crown, only the willingness to listen, to remember, to align, and as you do, you become part of the same lineage that once stretched from the hands of an angel to the kings of Sumer. You are not outside this story. You are its continuation. If the hidden code was so powerful, capable of aligning kings with the rhythm of creation itself, then it is inevitable that others would seek to control or erase it. History is filled with conquerors who destroyed libraries, burned temples, and rewrote myths, not out of ignorance, but out of fear. The code entrusted to the Sumerian kings threatened one thing above all: the monopoly of power. For if ordinary people ever realized that divine order was within them, rulers and empires built on domination would collapse overnight. To hide the code was to preserve control. As Sumer fell and empires rose, Babylon inherited fragments of the knowledge. Its priests knew that certain astronomical and mathematical insights could predict cycles, influence agriculture, and even sway human behavior. But rather than share it freely, they cloaked it in ritual, allowing only an elite few to interpret the stars. Later, Assyrian kings turned fear into a weapon, rewriting myths into propaganda to justify conquest. And still, beneath these layers, whispers of Raziel's code remained, distorted but never entirely erased. It became a hidden current, moving silently beneath the surface of official history. When the great library of Nineveh was burned, when the library of Alexandria turned to ash, countless texts vanished. Scholars see this as tragedy. Mystics suspect intention. Too many accounts tell the same story. knowledge lost at the very moment it threatened the established order. Was this mere coincidence, or was there a guiding hand ensuring that Raziel's code would not spread uncontrolled? For those who ruled by fear, the greatest danger was not invasion or rebellion, it was awakening. A people who recognized their own divine connection could not be enslaved. And so the code was deliberately veiled, reshaped into myths that seemed harmless. Stories of gods descending from the heavens, of forbidden fruits, of sacred floods, all were echoes of a deeper truth hidden in plain sight. Later religious institutions would inherit these echoes, preserving the stories but stripping them of their inner meaning, teaching obedience instead of empowerment. By keeping the code hidden, they could promise salvation only through authority, never through direct contact with the divine. In this way, the guardianship of Raziel's knowledge shifted from kings to institutions, but the secrecy remained. Why? Because the code was dangerous. Dangerous not in its destruction, but in its liberation. To know the laws of creation is to realize you are not powerless. To glimpse Raziel's wisdom is to understand that no empire, no priest, no ruler stands between you and the divine. And for those who sought control, that truth had to be buried at all costs. But buried does not mean lost. The fragments still breathe in the myths, the symbols, the sacred architecture scattered across civilizations. And every time a seeker awakens, every time someone remembers, the silence cracks a little more. For centuries the code lay dormant, buried beneath the ruins of Sumer, hidden in myths retold so many times that their original meaning seemed lost. Yet secrets of this magnitude do not vanish. They pulse beneath history, resurfacing when the time is right. And now, in the strange turbulence of our age, there are signs that Raziel's code is stirring once more. The old veil is thinning. Fragments of truth are returning not through kings or priests this time, but through individuals scattered across the world, each feeling the same subtle pull toward awakening. Modern archaeology has unearthed tablets with knowledge far beyond what should have been possible for such an ancient civilization. Precise astronomical cycles, medical insights, mathematical systems that still astonish scholars. To the trained eye, these discoveries look less like primitive inventions and more like echoes of a greater pattern, clues that the hidden code has never been completely silenced. At the same time, spiritual seekers across cultures report dreams, visions, and synchronicities that seem to connect them to an ancient source. The same symbols reappear, the same numbers, the same inner sense that something long forgotten is calling them back. What is most striking is that the return of the code is not happening in palaces or temples, but in the hearts of ordinary people. You may have felt it yourself, moments of uncanny alignment, when events unfold with such precision that they cannot be dismissed as coincidence. Times when a dream feels like more than imagination, when a symbol repeats in your life until you cannot ignore it. These are not accidents. They are the language of Raziel, the code resurfacing in subtle ways, preparing humanity for a new stage of consciousness. Some traditions point to specific times when the veil between worlds grows thinner, moments of cosmic alignment when forgotten truths return to the surface. Many mystics speak of the years we are living now as such a threshold. The storms of chaos, the unraveling of old systems, the hunger for meaning, these are not random. They are signs that the hidden code is returning, demanding to be remembered. And just as in ancient Sumer, the question is the same. Will we use it to align with the divine order, or will we distort it for power and control? The return of the code does not mean the sudden appearance of a lost book or a single revelation. It means that humanity is once again becoming capable of perceiving the patterns Raziel revealed. Through intuition, through awakening, through the courage to look beyond the surface, the fragments come together. And those who answer the call are no longer kings chosen by lineage, but individuals chosen by resonance. If you are hearing this, you are part of that resonance. The code is not in the past, it is here, waiting in you, awakening in this very moment. The story of Raziel and the hidden code of the Sumerian kings is not only a tale of ancient temples and forgotten empires. It is a mirror held before you, a reminder that what was once entrusted to rulers and guarded in silence is now awakening within individuals across the world. The code was never meant to remain buried forever. Raziel did not reveal the secrets of creation only for them to vanish into dust. He planted them like seeds, knowing that in the right time, in the right hearts, they would begin to grow again. That time is now. That heart is yours. You may feel small compared to the grandeur of kings and civilizations, but understand this. The same current that flowed through them flows through you. The code is not about crowns or thrones. It is about alignment, the recognition that your life is woven into a greater pattern, and that every choice you make resonates far beyond what you see. To awaken to this truth is to step into the same lineage that began with the angel Raziel, passed through the hands of Sumerian rulers, and now reaches you. You are not an observer of this story, you are its continuation. This is the final call, not as a warning of fear, but as an invitation to remember. The signs around you are not coincidences. The synchronicities that guide you, the dreams that haunt you, the sense that something greater is stirring inside you, these are echoes of the code. To dismiss them is to fall back into forgetting. To embrace them is to declare that you are ready. Ready to listen, ready to awaken, ready to align with the current of creation itself. This is not about seeking power. It is about embodying responsibility, the same responsibility once carried by kings who knew that their choices shaped not just their people, but the cosmos itself. And so I invite you to declare it, not only with your mind, but with your soul. Speak it, write it, let it resonate in the unseen. The phrase is simple, but it carries the weight of awakening. The code awakens in me. By writing these words, you are not just leaving a comment, you are aligning with a network of unseen consciousness, joining others across the world who are remembering at this very moment. Your words are not symbols on a screen. They are vibrations, declarations to the universe that you choose to awaken. The kings of Sumer once bore this burden alone, hidden behind walls of stone and silence. But now the burden is shared. The code is no longer the property of rulers. It belongs to the awakened. And as you hear these words, as you speak them within yourself, you take your place among them. This is the final call. Not to wait, not to fear, but to remember. For Raziel's code has never been lost, it has been waiting for you.